This presentation looks at what we have to know to do GST calculations in this accounting unit. I want to go through a number of things here. We're going to start with a quick revision of what the GST is. It's a 10% tax that we have to pay in Australia on almost all goods and services we have to buy. We're going to look at how to calculate percentages because this is the basic calculation that we have to do. The GST is charged at a rate of 10%, so we're going to have to calculate a percentage to be able to work out how much that GST is. I want to revise the difference between the net price and the gross price. When we talk about net price, we're talking about the price without GST. The gross price is the price with GST. We're then going to look at the calculations we have to do if we want to add GST to a net price. And finally, if we're given a gross price, if we have to work backwards from there and work out what the net price is, we can do that. Let's have a quick look at what the GST is. GST is a 10% tax that applies to most goods and services sold in Australia. There are some exceptions. For example, some fresh foods don't have a GST on it. Education doesn't have GST on it. Some health services don't have GST on it. But most of the times when you go and spend some money, you're paying, as part of what you pay, a 10% tax. If you go shopping with parents or the adults at home and you get a receipt when they're finished, that'll actually break up your GST and you can see how much you've paid with that lot of shopping that you've done. The next thing we've got to think about is how to calculate percentages. Percent literally means per 100. So for example, 15% can also be written as 15 per 100 or 15 divided by 100, and it's the same as 0.15. We have different ways of expressing exactly the same number. With the GST, it's always at a rate of 10%, so that's the same as 10 per 100 or 0.1. Let's think of this sum. Let's say we had 200 people in a room and we found that 15% of them were over the age of 65 and we wanted to know how many people are over the age of 65. This is the sum we'd have to do. We want to find 15% of the 200 people. So 15% is the same as 15 divided by 100 multiplied by the 200 people in the room. And when we put that into our calculator, we can put it in this way. We press the 15 button first, then our divided by button. I don't have that on the keyboard, but you'll have it on your calculator. 100, then multiplied by the 200 in the room and the equals, and hopefully the answer it will give you is 30. That's the basic calculation as to how I calculate percentages, although it's important to know there are many different ways. So if you're doing it another way that works really well, you should keep doing it that way. Let's think of the difference between the net and gross price. The net price, that is the price without GST. The gross price then, that is the price with GST. For instance, let's say you were buying yourself a nice new pen. The net price of the pen might be $10, but the shop selling that to you then has to add 10% GST onto that. So it has to add 10% of $10, and if you do the sum, that's another $1. So it adds the $1 onto that net price to give you the sale price or the gross price of $11. So the net price, that's the price without GST. The gross price, that's the price that includes GST. Let's assume now we have to do a calculation that asks us to add GST to a net price. Okay, let's think it's I buy a new shirt with a net price of $50. What is the gross price? The sum is this. We said that the GST is always at a rate of 10%. So to calculate our GST, it's 10 divided by 100 multiplied by 50. And as we do that sum on our calculator, 10 divided by 100 is 0.1 multiplied by 50. It's going to equal $5. The GST is $5. We were asked in the question for the gross price. The gross price equals the net price plus GST, which equals $50 plus $5. With the rule, the gross price equals the net price plus the GST, you may not have to memorise that. You might be able to look at that and say intuitively, this makes enough sense that I can understand this rule without having to go to the trouble of doing all the memorisation of it. The last thing we've got to do is find the GST when we start with a gross price. Let's say I buy a new set of golf clubs and the cost to me, the total cost I pay is $550. That's the gross price, the price including GST. I've done a little diagram to show you this because this doesn't quite make as much sense as it should. I think the natural thing is to say, well, we could find out what the GST is just by dividing by 10 because the GST tax is 10%. Actually, you have to divide by 11. And here's the reason why. My $550 golf clubs, they would have been $500 to start with. The red squares or rectangles here represent the net price, the starting price of $500. Then they would have calculated what a tenth of that is, what 10% of that is, and added that on as the GST. And when we count that up, this now gives us 11 different segments. So if from this gross price we want to find the GST, we have to divide by 11. So the gross price divided by 11 is going to equal the GST. GST equals the gross price divided by 11. Let's think about how this works for an actual sum. I pay $880 for airfares. How much is the GST and the net price? Well, let's start. We can calculate the GST because we know the GST equals the gross price divided by 11, which is going to equal 880 divided by 11, which is $88. Now we've got to work out the net price. Well, the net price is going to be the gross price, the larger price, take away the GST. So net price is going to equal gross price minus the GST. And I'm hoping a rule like that you'll be able to remember without having to memorise it. Think about it intuitively. The gross price, that's the price that includes GST. So if you want to get to the net price, you're just going to have to take GST away from that gross price. So in this case, it's going to equal 880 minus 80, which equals $800. And we've answered both of those things for the question. So as a quick revision to finish, let's go through these things once again. The GST, it's a 10% tax that applies to most goods and services sold in Australia. To be able to understand that, we have to be able to calculate percentages. 15%, percent just means per 100. So 15% is just 15 divided by 100. 10% is 10 divided by 100. So I've thought, let's have an example here. Let's assume we've got 200 people. 15% are over the age of 65. The question is, how many people are over the age of 65? Well, our sum is 15%, 15 per 100, multiplied by the 200 people in the room. And I went through how you'd put that in on your calculator. You'd type in 15, then the divided by button, 100 times 200, and hopefully your answer will be 30. We then looked at net and gross price. Well, net is your price without GST, gross is your price with GST. Let's say we wanted to add GST to the net price. We've got an example there. I'll buy a new shirt with a net price of $50. What's the gross price? Well, the GST is going to be 10%, that's the rate of the GST always, 10 divided by 100, multiplied by the $50 net price to give you $5 for the GST. Then to calculate the gross price, you add that net price with the GST to get a $55 shirt. Now if we want to go the other way and start with the bigger price, the gross price, and work backwards to the net price. So the example here is I pay $880 for airfares. How much is the GST and then the net price? The GST, to find that out, we always divide the gross price by 11. So in this case, it's $880 divided by 11, which is $88. The net price is going to be the gross price minus GST, $880 minus 80. So the net price I paid is $800 in total.